What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Gates, and this is The Crazy One. This is the channel and the podcast where we talk about design, creativity, leadership, and all sorts of different stuff that matter to creative people. Now, if you like the content, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell so you get the latest videos whenever those come out. Now today, what we want to do is to give you and teach you the basics of Apple Keynote. This could be an incredibly powerful, incredibly cool presentation program, but figuring out how to make it work and be able to get your first deck up and running can be a little bit tricky. So what I want to do is today, I want to walk you through everything that I've learned because I've used this program for years. I build so many decks every week. I've been on stage all over the world using this for years, so trust me, I know the ins and outs of this program. But today what I want to do is I want to teach you the basics. Just how do you get up and running? How do you set up the workspace so it's actually going to be able to work for you? How do you organize your deck so you can be able to stay sane? How do you work with things like master slides, transitions, builds? How do we do some basic designing and work with text? So by the time we run through all that, you're going to have a really good handle on all the basic features for it so you can be able to create some great presentations on your own. So that's what we're up to today. Let's get into it. Okay, well, here we are. Now, the first time you fire up Keynote, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see this choose a theme. And what themes are that these are a bunch of just different options, different designs, different backgrounds, different things that you can use to be able to help make your presentation look a little bit better in case you don't want to design your own. Now, you can go through and navigate them over here on the side. There are these different Recix, Basics, Bold, Editorial, Minimal, Portfolio, Craft, and Textured. And so obviously as you go each one of those, you're going to be able to see sort of a different selection. But for this one, what we're going to do is I'm just going to pick a basic white. Now, the only other thing to be able to think about on here to be able to choose is the actual size of the screen. Now, most of the time, whenever you're watching it on the TV like this, anything like that, that is a 16:9 ratio. That means it's 16 units across and 9 units high. Now, if it's on an older TV or something like that, that's called a 4:3. So if you think about the old TV, like a tube TV, that was a 4:3. Movies, you know, your monitor, your laptop, that's a 16:9. So most of the time, leave it by 16:9. I think I've done one 4:3 presentation maybe in the last 10 years, so just leave it on that. Now, what we want to be able to do then is to hit create. And so then this is going to be able to kind of come in and pop in here. Now, what we're going to be able to do now is to be able to just sort of go over what are some of the basics. And what I want to be able to look at right here is this little icon here. And what that is that this is for the document. And this is just to be able to make sure that everything is set up the way that you want, or if you ever need to be able to come back and change some of these things. Things like, will the presentation automatically play whenever you open it? Do you want to loop this? So if it's a slideshow, again, that'd probably be if it was working at like a booth or like doing a display, something like that. If it's sitting idle, how often do you want to restart it? Just sort of simple things like that. Now, there's also presentation type, which you're going to see here, which is normal, only links, or self-playing. And so again, those are for more of like kiosk style things. And then again, if you ever want to, you can come back in here and be able to change that. But that's really just sort of it, is there's this just sort of basic layout to what this is to be able to get to these screens. And whenever you do this, congratulations, you've created a presentation. Now, next, let's get into how do we actually start to customize this space so that it actually starts to work the best and understand what are all these different areas of the screen all about. We've gone in, we've created our first presentation, we picked our theme. Easy enough. Now what we want to be able to do is to start to understand what are all these different areas that we have around here. What we're going to do is we're going to start up here at the top. And this area up here at the top is the toolbar. Now, this is one of the most secret kind of things, and it's going to hide one of the most powerful parts of this program. Because what you can do is if you just right-click on it, you'll see here, there's this item that says Customize Toolbar. Now, in here is actually hidden a ton of functionality. Because what happens is whenever I hit that, I get this big flyout. And all of a sudden, I can see there are things like view, zoom, I can make tables, charts, text, shapes, media, all this different stuff, right? Like you can explore all this or explore it in pieces as we go through this video. But what you want to be able to do is to go through and to be able to customize and pull down the things that you're going to use the most. Now, for me, the things that I'm going to use the most are going to be up here, the ability to have different views. How zoomed in is it? The ability to actually do the presentation, to share and collaborate with other people, which is Keynote Live, which is what those two are. We'll talk about that in a separate video. The ability to do shapes, type, be able to move things forward, move things back, group, ungroup, text, superscript, subscript, connect things together, edit my master templates, turn on my grid lines, crop things in, the ability to make bullets, leave notes, to lock something to the background. So again, it won't move around, to unlock it. And then these three items, which we're going to get into a little bit more, which really sort of controls this sidebar on the side. But that's the first thing that you want to be able to do, is to go in and just sort of look at this. Pick some of these, start with the default, do whatever it is you want to do. But as you start to work with it, start to notice what tools you use the most and go back and you want to be able to sort of then go through and customize this. Now, the other part is then going to be this bar that we have over here. And this is going to be all of your slides. So if I copy and paste a bunch of these in here, now what we can actually see is that these are different slides. So as I go in and start to put content in there, you'll see those little thumbnails are going to start to change. So you can see the 1, 2, 3 that's in there. But that's all that this is this is just going to be the order in which these slides go in. Now, a simple thing to do is if you want to reorder them, just be able to click on it, drag it, move it around. Couldn't be any easier. Now, but another little trick here that some people don't know about is you can actually nest, so that, because some of these decks that I make are like 100, 200 slides long. It is really hard to sit here and scroll through this big, huge thing like it's some long, crazy person. So what you can do is if you want to be able to put this into sections, here again, whenever you click on it, you see you can start to move it around. Just drag it to the right, and you'll see that there's a little bar right next to that that starts to highlight, where now what I can do is I can start to drag these in. Well, the other key thing that happens is that we get this little arrow here, and what that arrow allows me to do is to collapse that section. So now, whenever I had, instead of having to scroll through all these 8 slides, now I can just collapse that down, makes it much easier to work with. And you can keep nesting these however much you want, just keep dragging them to the right, and you'll be able to keep grouping them in. It's just a simple little trick, makes things a lot easier to be able to start to manage your decks whenever those start to get a lot bigger. Now, on the other side over here, when I talked about we had these 3 little icons up here, this is where, again, a lot of functionality is hidden. The first one is going to be here for slide layout. And what this is that at some point you say, okay, well, I have this particular layout. And you know what? I don't really love it. I want to be able to put in a photo. So now if I go in and hit Change Master right there, what I can do is be able to go through and see what are all the different options that I have. So if I want that one to be a photo, I want that one to be numbers in the middle, and I want this one to be 3 photos. Okay, well, that's easy enough. Now I was able to go through, change those, so I can just start to rough those in, and you can see it has this little photo icon down there. So just take whatever photos you want, drag those in, same thing, little photo icon there, drag it in, change it, do whatever you want. But now this way you can start to get the layout the way that you want, start to be able to get the different things that you want. And again, it's that ability right there on Change Master. Now, the other thing is that if you want to be able to use slide numbers, it can do it automatically. You'll see right there, slide number. Again, this is in this slide layout, that little paintbrush. Turn that on, slide numbers show up right there. Super simple. Most of the time, I'm not printing my decks. I don't really refer to slide numbers whenever I present, so I sort of leave that off. Now, the backgrounds. So the backgrounds of the slide, obviously, if it's a color fill, it's that color. So easy enough. Change the color, background changes. Change it back, background does it again. But you also have some options. You can have no fill. So again, if you just want nothing to be there, color, gradient, which means, again, it'll go from one color at the top to another color at the bottom. You can see that there. An advanced gradient, which is going to mean I can actually use multiple colors if I want. So if I want to do something crazy like that, that's what an advanced would be. Image fill. So if I actually want to be able to, just like it says, put an image in the background, or an advanced image fill. And so this is something where, again, I can go through and I can pick an image. I can decide if I want to tile it and then do something like put a gradient on top of it. A lot of different options for this one. We'll just keep it simple and use it for that sort of color fill. Now, there are 2 other things that can be really useful whenever you're doing this that a lot of people a lot of times want. Now, one of the things that I really like is if you ever used a design program, you use Photoshop, you use Sketch, anything like that, you're probably used to working with layers. They have the similar thing, but in Keynote, it is this, Object List. So what you want to do, View, Object List, turn that on. And now what you'll see is I get this little bar that shows up over here. And now all of a sudden, the images that are here show up as different layers. So now you can see there's a little lock and unlock icon. I can start to just simply work with and pick this out. On a simple slide like this, when there are three images, not really that big of a deal, not that hard to work with everything, but on more complicated slides, this will save your life. Now, the last thing is, and this is something I don't use, a lot of other people do like to use, is presenter notes. And that is, whenever you're actually presenting, what's the little cheat sheet, the notes, the thing that you can look at. And here again, we want to go back to View, and right there, Show Presenter Notes. And whenever you hit that, this white area at the bottom is going to show up. And it sort of looks like nothing to begin with. So again, maybe it could have been designed a little bit better. But if you click into it, then we can see that presenter notes will go here. And so now then all of a sudden, as I go through my deck, I can have little cheat sheet or these little notes that whenever I'm presenting, those are going to show up at the bottom. So like I said, I don't use them, so I leave them off. But this is the basic layout that I'm going to use. I'm going to customize the toolbar up here. I'm going to go through, I'm going to use this space to be able to organize my slides. I have my object list to be able to work with those slides a little bit more easily. And then again, my slide layout is over here. So up next, what I want to get into is I want to get into this right here. I want to get into transitions, which is that whenever we go through and we play this, what is actually going to happen between these slides? How do we actually move between them so it's a little bit more interesting than just sort of one slide flipping to another? So let's get into that now. We've gone through. We've opened up a basic document, we picked a theme, we've started to customize this the way that we wanted. We've even gone through and started to add some content, some different things in here. Again, remember, with the master slides so that we can just start to get the look, the layout, and be able to start to get the content that we want. So great. But the problem is that whenever we play it, it's just going to sort of cut from one slide to the next. It's not going to have much personality, it's not going to have much interest. Now, the first way that we're going to be able to start to really work on making those feel a little bit richer, a little bit more professional, is going to be right here with this. And so what we want to be able to do is to click on this, and we want to see that here at the top, it'll say transitions. Now, there's a little thing to be able to watch out for here. Now, I did an entire other video. I'll put the link below, and you'll probably see it somewhere, I don't know, probably on the screen, maybe right there in the middle. Ooh, cool. Okay, but what that explains is what is the difference between transitions and builds. And so you're going to see that whenever I've got a slide selected, it says transition. Whenever I pick an object, then it changes to build. So you just want to be aware of that if all of a sudden you're going in and you have something selected and you go in and you pick an effect, then all of a sudden it doesn't work the way that you want. And that's a little bit of the problem, right? Is because some of the transitions and the builds are actually the same in both places. So it's a little bit easy to get confused. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to work on transitions. And that is, as I go through this deck, what I want to be able to do is to do something cool. So I've got the end of this section, rearrange those a little bit again so that those are a little bit easier. Now, as I kind of come to the end of this and go to that next big section, I want it to do something interesting. Now, what happens is whenever I go through and I start to roll down this list, you're going to see that right there, it says preview. So what happens is at any point, if I want to, and I click on that, what you're going to see is it just gives me a little preview of what is an object revolve versus a dissolve versus a push versus if I want to do a flip, right? So now I can start to see, okay, well, there's some different ways of being able to do that. Clothesline, probably a little bit dramatic, probably even more dramatic. Confetti. Don't know why you'd ever want to use that, but hey, you never know. But, for this one, let's do a grid. That feels, I don't know what, kind of interesting, kind of cool. It's a little fast, though. So now once I picked it, what you can see is that there's direction and duration. And what that is obviously duration is how long does that take? So if it's a little bit too fast, change it to 2 seconds. Maybe still a little bit too fast. 2.5. Okay, that feels better. It's not quite as sort of manic. And you know what? On the direction, since let's do, bottom from the bottom, I think that feels a little bit better. But it's a simple way of just being able to add in this kind of personality. And then that's the other thing you can notice is that whenever a slide has a transition on it, you get this blue corner that appears on the slide. So all of these have no corner. So again, it's just a simple way to be able to tell that for there, and here we can make this a little bit bigger so it's a little bit easier to see. There we go. Now you can see that that one has a transition and these other ones don't. Well, why don't we add transitions to those 3? So we'll just pick those 3. And in that case, what's a weird sort of funny one? How I don't know what, how bad do we want to be? Let's do revolving door. That's pretty ridiculous. Okay, so we'll do that, and we'll change that to 1.5 seconds. And you know what? The bounce makes it look a little too old-timey for me. Okay, so now what you can see is that now I've got blue corners on all of these. So the thing that I would tell you to do whenever you do this is that consistency is key. Consistency in two ways. One is that as you go inside of a section from these sort of slides, you want to try to keep them consistent. Because what I want you to be able to do is to be able to just sort of understand that that's the consistent movement. Because if it changes every time, it sort of disorients people. Where I do often want it to be different is in this change here. Whenever I'm done with a section, I'm going to another section. Then what I like to do is to mark that not only with a visual difference, but with a motion difference. So that all of this inside the section is the same. Whenever we change sections, that's different. Just because, again, it's a simple way of just letting people know that, hey, something different's going on here. But again, be consistent in the way that you change off that last piece right there into these. But that's the thing, is like right now, so great, we just have this nice, simple, all of these are just kind of a revolving door. So as we go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, okay, great. Those are nice and consistent. Now I get to the end of the section, then I'm going to do a grid and do a different move, right? So now it feels like, you know, we're changing sections. And so think about that. Think about the motion design. Think about how you're using that sort of stuff. It's really simple, but again, it can be really effective. So that's how do you get between these different slides. But what happens if I want to start to animate some of these elements that are in the slide? Let's get into that next as we start to look at builds. Okay, so like I said before, transitions were what happens and how do we animate between slides. Now builds, and that's why I said this is the thing where you've got to pay super close attention. Whenever on the slide this says transition, whenever I pick the object, now all of a sudden this changes where it says build in, action, and build out. Now, if you want to find out more of the intricacies of that, again, go check out the advanced animation video that I did where I'll explain what is a build in, a build out, and action, get into those in more detail. But since this is just the intro, we're just going to concern ourselves here with build in. Now, what you want to be able to do again to trigger that, click on an element. So whenever you click on it, you see I get this blue bar that comes up around it. Now, whenever I click on this, you're going to see there are some similar sort of effects to what you saw before, but now the difference is going to be that instead of affecting the entire slide, what it's going to do is it's just going to affect that one element. So now if I look at that, now all it's doing is it's just simply going to affect what happens with this 2. And so do I want that to drop in, to be able to bounce in? Do I want it to be able to just dissolve in place? Well, let's do this drop because that feels a little bit more dramatic. And again, it's going to get people's attention. Again, another trick to be able to do this whenever you're building in slides, people's eye will always be drawn to motion. So always use motion to help them focus on the thing you want them to see. So again, whenever I run this, your eye immediately goes to that 2. You just can't help it. It's a natural part of what you do. But that's the thing, right? So now I can pick this, I can say for that, and then let's do a compress on the headline. Now, the other part of this, and again, I get into this more in the advanced animation, is this build order down here. This is what controls all of these different builds, because what happens whenever you click that is this menu comes up. And what you can see is we have 2 items here, number 1 and number 2, which then correspond to number 2, and headline will go here. Now, what I can do is you can see as I click on these, that selects, and it changes here. Here again, click on that, that selects, changes here. So it just simply lets me to be able to go in and work with these things, but there's more to it than that. Because what is hidden in here is this, when does this happen? So start can either be on click or after the transition. Right now, the way it's set up is I would click the slide, it would go from 1 to 2, and then it would sit there blank. And I'd have to click it again, and whenever I click it again, then this 2 would drop in. And then whenever I click it again, that headline would appear. And you know what? Actually, I don't like that headline, so let's make that left justified. Okay, that's a little bit cleaner. So, but what I want to be able to do is, I just want that to happen automatically. I don't want to have to sit there and click 900 times to be able to get every one of my slides to build. So what you want to be able to do here is, again, this start. And what I want to do is to do after transition. So now it'll play this transition, and that 2 will automatically come in. And then the headline. Here again, it says on click. Now what I can do is I can do it with that first build or after. With means the 2 happen at the same time. So there again, you can see they happen at the same time. After means the 2 will come in, then the headline comes in, right? So the thing here is that, the with feels like it happens too fast. The after feels like it happens too slow. So the other thing that you can do is to do width, and then there's this delay option. And what this is going to let you do is just be able to say, okay, we'll do it together, but just stagger the timing a little bit. So in this case, let's do 0.4 seconds. So now we can see that those two happen a little bit closer together. Let's make that even a little bit more. So now that 2 starts to come in a little bit more, and then the headline underneath it starts. That starts to feel better. But this is where you're going to be able to start to change, refine, bring a lot of personality into these builds, is with this little menu. And again, it's hidden down here in this bottom corner in this build order. So this is the thing. Whenever you click on that, that's what it's going to give you, is this ability to be able to control all of this. But this is what you want to be able to do, is you want to go in and be able to use these sort of things to be able to build your slides. It makes them feel much more professional. It makes them be able to let people focus much, much more than they normally would. And it just takes that whole deck to another level. So again, practice going through and doing each one of these. Again, select on what it is, come in here, say, okay, what is it you want to do? In that case, something like that. And then again, I can go through and set it up. Super simple, but again, this is another one of these great spots. Just go in and play around with it and see what you like and see what works. Now, next, let's move on to actually doing some design, because what we did was with all of these, we went through and we picked, okay, well, great. Here are all these sort of different themes that we want. Maybe that we actually want to start to build our own. So let's start to look at how can you actually start to use some of the basic design elements. So let's just start with a blank slide. And so what we want to do is really start to concentrate on this shape piece. And again, remember from before, you go in, customize the toolbar, and you can put that there. Now, what happens whenever you click on this is that, again, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. And the first part of it you're going to see normally are just these sort of basic shapes, basic lines, different things like that. Great. The other thing, if you, again, want to be able to use this, is that there is other options in here of objects, animals, nature, food, symbols, like all kinds of stuff. There's also the ability to come in and search those. You can be able to find all that different stuff whenever it's there. And again, it can just sort of make it a nice little easy way to be able to do some of this stuff. So, you know what, for today, let's pick a car. And so what we want to do is to make that car a little bit bigger, so we can see it nice and easy. But that's the thing, right? Is that what we're able to do now is to be able to come in here and start to use different shapes. And this is just going to be the basics of design, is to be able to come in here, pick this different stuff out, resize it, do whatever we want with it. But the other part of this is that how do we want to change colors? How do we want to start to work with it, rotate it, do different things? So here again, come back to this paintbrush. And what you can see is that, again, each one of these things isn't always the same thing. And this is where it does get confusing, is that if nothing is selected, then what I'm working with is actually the appearance of the entire deck, or in this case, again, background color, different things like that. So then I can work with the slide. But if I click on something, now I get different options that are in here. And for the design piece of this, what I really want to look at is we're going to look at style, and we're going to look at arrange. Now in style, what you can do is there can be some simple pre-filled out colors. You can add your own. So here again, if there are colors that you want to work with, do things like that. You can add them in here so they're always there. Or there's also this color fill option. So again, I have the ability to click this, be able to pick different colors that I like. Or there's a color wheel in here so that this allows me to get much more detailed, much more refined about what this is. I can do that through RGB sliders. I can do it through swatches. I can do it from a photo, or I will never understand the colored pencils, but you can do it that way too, right? But I think that's the part, is in here, what you can do, great, is now I can start to work with color. But again, there's more to that. Border is really an outline. I don't know why they call it border. For me, it's always an outline. And so again, if I wanted that to actually have a line around it, you can see whenever I pick that, now all of a sudden it has a line. I can change the thickness of it. I can change the color of it. I can even change the style. So again, do I want a dotted line, dashed line, drawn in looking line, different things like that. But again, you can go through, be able to work with the border, just sort of really simply make it a little bit more complicated again. Now, the other thing is the ever-present, everybody always needs drop shadow. And again, they don't call it drop shadow, it's just shadow, but you can do drop shadow, contact shadow, or curved shadow. Now, drop shadow, is, and you know what, let's make this a little bit bigger because it's a little hard to see there. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Now, the drop shadow is just that. It's a drop shadow and I can control it. Blur is obviously, as you can see, how blurry or how focused is it. Offset is how far away is it from the object. Opacity, how dark do I want it to be. And the angle basically really controls the light source. So where do I want the light source to be that's going to cast the shadow? And again, I can also do it as a reflection, where you can see it adds that little, this was sort of like a big thing that Apple did like a couple years ago, is everything had a reflection on it. You can control how much reflection does it have. Not a big fan of the reflection. But drop shadow, so that's what that is. Contact shadow. This is just going to be where it looks like, and let me blow this up a little bit. This is going to be, so it looks like it's actually sitting on the surface a bit more. So you can see right there, along the bottom and right there. So it makes it look like it's actually sitting on top of something. So again, if we're going to do something with a car, contact shadow would make a ton of sense, because now what we're going to be able to do is to make it look like that car is actually sitting on the ground there and there. Much easier. And then the last one is curved shadow, which is really that it sort of makes it look like the space behind is curved. It's almost like it was sitting on a curved wall, where it's even here and starts to pull away there. Again, we can sort of make the offset a little bit bigger, take the opacity down a bit, but you can see you can bend it outward, so it looks like the wall goes out, inward. So again, it just gives you that simple ability to be able to kind of give it sort of a cool look. If you want to be able to make it look a little bit more dimensional, do something like that. Simple way to be able to do that. But this is sort of the basics, right? Is that this gives you that ability. So now if I want to be able to go through, and I want these to be my buttons, go through and duplicate these, and to be able to work with that. Now, the other part of this, again, is that for any object, if you double click on it, you can write in it. So you can go through and add text to anything. And again, once you do that, you can change the color. We'll get to that more in a minute. But if you ever want to know how to do that, this is just a simple way. Just double click and you can go through and put the text in there. Easy enough. Now, the other part of this then is arrange. And what arrange does, again, isn't completely true to what that sounds like. Now, what it can allow you to do is, so if I overlap these buttons, I can do things like moving things forward. I can move them to the back. I can do that one at a time. I can do different things like that. If I have multiple things selected, I can align them so they're all aligned left. They're all aligned in the middle. We don't want to do that because now they get too overlapped. I can do other things. So if I want to look at the spacing, that's what distribute is. Horizontally means, again, they're going to be distributed evenly this way. Vertically would be this way. In this case, or evenly does both. In this case, I want them evenly vertically. So that's a nice way of being able to, if you're not sure on your spacing, easy way to be able to do that. Now, the other part in here is, again, I can control the size so that if I want these to all be exactly the same size, say this one gets a little bit out of whack, I can see this is 469 by 97. Come in here, 469, 97. Now they're the same size again. Position, X and Y, I can rotate them. So again, just gives you that easy little spin wheel to be able to do that. The other part is if you hold down the Shift key, it will do it in 45-degree increments. So that makes it a little bit easier for doing some of those sort of things. Again, I can put in the exact angle. I can flip it either way, easy things like that. And again, I can also then affect the corner radius. And that's going to be how big is this curve. So again, if I really exaggerate it, you can see what happens. If I make it really small, you can see what happens. But that way, if you just want a little bit of that curved look on something, that's what you can do. And that's just sort of the basics of how do you get started with design. And like I said, you have a ton of different stuff to be able to work with in here. You have these lines that you can do. And lines are, again, really simple. Go into style on the line, make this bigger so it's easier to see. This one has an arrow, and you can do that right there. Endpoint. Do I want one at the beginning? Do I want a different one at the end? How do I want to be able to change those up? So again, a lot of different variety in there. You want to be able to do freeform lines. You can, this will usually just get you a connecting line, which means it will connect two things. A lot of people pull that down thinking that you can draw with that. That's not the case. This little pen up here, that's if you want to be able to do that. Now what you can do is just be able to take a point down, drag it, So again, the same thing if you're used to doing this in Illustrator, doing it in other places, do these sort of Bezier lines. If you click and drag, you get that. If you just straight click, you get straight lines. So again, you can do that, come back to the beginning and it connects it. Sort of looks like a mess, so we'll get rid of that. But those are just sort of the basics, is the ability to go through, do these different things, to be able to kind of go in, make your own design, start to do that sort of stuff. Now, the other thing you can do with some of these is we saw in one of these other slides, let me duplicate this one, images. So how do I put an image in here? Again, same thing. Start with this right here, just start with a box. And then what you can do is under fill, here, go to image fill right there, change that over. Now what you can do is just go to choose and pick any photo you want and it will drop it in there. And then you can resize it, mask it, do all that sort of stuff with it. And so again, super simple way to be able to do that, but that's just a nice way that that's the same thing. You pick whatever shape you want, do an image fill, that's the way you can bring in images. Now next and finally, let's look at text, because that's gonna be the last big thing we're gonna be able to work through in all this. So the last part of getting any good deck designed is obviously going to be text, because people are going to need to read something. And so here again, we have this little item up here at the top. Click on text. Whenever I do that, we see a little text box shows up here. Now, over before we talked about style, we talked about arrange. Now there's this middle tab of text. Now again, there's a lot of different stuff that goes on here. So the basics you're probably used to. You can come in, pick different types. You can come in, make it bold, italic, underline, strike through, different things like that. Now, here again, there are a few little hidden things, so let's make this a little bit bigger. So text goes here, and let's make that 200 so it makes it nice and easy to read. Cool, got that there. Okay, now, the other thing is we have this little gear, and a lot of people overlook this. Again, there's more goodness that hides in there. And actually, you know what? Let me make this a little bit smaller so that you can actually see what's there. Okay. So the first one in here is going to be character spacing, and that's just going to be what is the space between these letters. Different typefaces are going to have different kerning in the way that they're done. So what you want to be able to do is you can go in and be able to make these tighter. So if I want this to overlap a lot more, I can change this percentage, and then that's going to affect that type style. The other thing here is going to be baseline shift, and that's just going to be how far up and down off of the baseline, so there's a little line that all this text is sitting on, how far above or below that do I want? And again, I can also do other things. So if I want to do something that looks like a fraction, which is either like a superscript, baseline here, superscript, I can make a superscript out of that, set that back to default. This, you know what, this probably isn't the best typeface to be able to show this because this is always all caps. So let's change it to that, and let's go text goes here. Okay, if I want everything to be capitalized all the time, instead of having to go back and redo that in my entire deck, here again, capitalization. I can have all caps, I can have small caps. So again, it's just the initial letter is cap, the rest goes small. Title case, which means the first letter is uppercase and the rest are lowercase. Or I can do start case, which again is going to be the first letter of those sort of things. But again, that ability to be able to just go in and do that makes that super simple. I can make these into outlines. And so again, that sometimes people don't know you can do this, is that if on this, I want that to be outlined in yellow. Let's make that a little bit bigger so you can actually see it. I can do outline type here. I can put a shadow on it. So again, you can start to create fairly sophisticated type effects just right inside of Keynote on this. So, you know, let's make that offset a little bit bigger so you can see it. And let's make it not quite so dark. There we go. So here again, just, you know, really simply, really quickly, you can start to create fairly sophisticated looking typography just to be able to do that. But again, it's all hidden in here. And so again, that little gear is something you definitely want to be able to check out. Text color, just what that is. And again, with the text color, you can be a solid gradient. You can fill it with an image. So again, if I want to make that even funkier, there again, has a gradient fill with an outline and a drop shadow. Pretty much impossible to read, but hey, it looks cool, so go crazy. But let's take that back to just simple. Alignment, do I want it to be left aligned, right aligned, different things like that. Indents, and this is going to be where do I want this to appear in the box. So let's do this on a couple different lines. Okay. Now what I can do with this is that sometimes these text boxes will get a little bit bigger. and make that just like that. And what this is going to be is, do I want this to be able to sit up and butt up against the top, butt up against the bottom, or be in the middle? This doesn't always come up, but sometimes if it does, that's the way to be able to control it. Now, the other thing is going to be, you can see, you could drive a truck through the line spacing that we have here. And this is the way that this typeface normally does it. There is no way in hell that I want my type to be that far apart. So now, spacing. Again, I can be able to simply control that. I can do it with lines. At least is a little bit different because this starts to use points, which is a little bit different. An exact number. So again, this is much smaller. I tend to like to do exact because lines, as you can see, the jumps here get pretty big. And so you can see this is now overlapping. I don't want that. And this is still too big. So again, I can go in and control those individually. I usually like to do exact just because it's a little bit better before that. Before the paragraph and after the paragraph, this just means how much space do I actually want to be built into that, different things like that. And then finally, bullets. Do I want a bullet? And so a bullet will happen every time you hit return. All right, so you can see there, the box is small enough. Since I'm getting rid of the returns, I'm getting rid of the bullets. But if I go and put the returns back in, the bullets come back. So again, just a simple way to be able to do that. If you want to create bullets, that's how you can do it. And again, you can make them into images if you want to do something different. You can be letters, they can be numbers. If you want to do a numbered list, this is all where you control that is through bullets and lists. So again, there's a lot here, but remember, there's a lot hidden in the gear, and that again, the ability to come in and change how you want to do spacing can really save your sanity on all of that. Now, hopefully by now, you've got enough tips, tricks, things like that to be able to start to work with this stuff. But the other thing you can do with type that can become important is this right here. So what we can see is there are these paragraph styles. And by default, most of these themes have titles, subtitles, bodies, different things like that. But what you can do is that this allows you, if you want to go and make a change to the type in your deck, you can change the entire deck in one place. So you don't have to go change 200 slides. But the way that you'll do that is, so let's pick title. You know what, let's do a different one of these because that's just a little too messed up. So again, text goes here. And what I want to do is to pick title style. And see, immediately whenever I pick that, that's what it looks like. Well, I don't want to use Helvetica New for my deck. What I want to be able to use is, I like Ina. I like it to be a little bit smaller on the line spacing. I like it a little bit tighter there, so I like that. So this is what I want to use for my whole deck. Now, what you can see happened here is that title now has an asterisk next to it, meaning that this has been changed from its original version. And now there's also an update that is here. So if this is the style that I want to use everywhere, if I hit update, now this is the title style for everywhere. So again, if I want to come in, do another line of text. Great. And now all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I want that to be the same style. Pick it, exact same style. Makes it super easy to start to replicate this. But that's the thing you want to be able to do is to go through. And so again, if I want the subtitle, again, so I want it to look like that. Wrong typeface. So again, make it 3. Let's take the letter spacing in a little bit, make the line spacing a little bit tighter, update, cool. So this is something, again, that it takes the time in the beginning. It can be a little bit more of a pain in the butt to do, but the ability to go in and do that, because here's the thing, is that now all of a sudden, if I have a bunch of these slides that all have this text on it, and I decide down the road, I'm like, you know what? This headline style, that's actually a little bit too small for it to be able to work everywhere. I need it to be 140, and you know what? The boss wants these all to be blue. Okay, so now instead of having to go back into each one of these and change it, one hit of that update button, and you can see these all changed. So again, it's just a simple way to be able to manage your decks, keep your sanity, and do stuff like that. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at just sort of some of the presenter and how you'd actually be able to present the deck, and then we'll be all done. Okay, now finally what I want to show you is, I want to show you what one of my actual decks look like. So you can just sort of see what does it look like whenever this all comes together. Like I said, my decks are very complicated. They are very long. This is a 40-minute deck that's 86 slides long. Again, the number of slides you use shouldn't dictate the length, but here again, you can start to see because of the complexity. Why do things like, again, this object list become important? Because I'm working with a lot of different things. How, again, I'm doing grouping so that it makes it really easy for me to be able to go through in each one of these sections I can zip up the entire deck into one easy to work with thing. So now again, this whole thing comes into a nice easy spot. I can see the entire thing in one window. Now, if I want to go in and work on one of those, I can open that up. Makes it much easier for me to be able to do those sort of things. So that's why just some of this stuff becomes really, really important. Now, the last part of this is how do you actually show the deck? Now, there are two ways to be able to do this. The first one is you can use this play button right here, or here under play slideshow. And what that'll do is that'll actually just launch these slides. But the other thing is that if you're working with any sort of usual setup where you have like a TV monitor in your laptop, you're also going to have the ability to do two things, which is one, to be able to have this, the slideshow, but there's also going to be a presentation view. And so let's actually take a second and let's look at both of those, because it's good to understand the difference between the two, understand why they're both important. So again, you can be able to set this up the right way. So I hit play. And this is what you see. I see my entire screen taken up with this deck. Whenever I click on it, I can see all the transitions working. I can see everything building in. I can see it working. And this is the way it was going to show up on the monitor, on the TV screen, at the theater, whatever this is going to be. This is what it is that I'm going to see. And so that's great. I want to be able to go through. I just want to do what I'm doing right now. I just want to be able to click through, take a look at this stuff, look at it, and to be able to say, okay, is that working the way that I like? Is the timing good? All of those sort of things. So great. That's easy enough. But now if I go back to play, and instead of hitting play slideshow, I hit rehearse, what I'm going to see is this. And this may look a little bit funky, but what this is this is actually the presenter view. And what this does is this has a few important things that I've set up in here. It has things like a timer, so I know if this is a 40-minute presentation, it's counting down from 40, so I know how much time I have left. It tells me what slide I'm on. The big one, this is the slide that I'm on right now, so that this is what's going to be on the screen behind me, on the movie theater screen behind me, on the TV that maybe I can't see. This is what's on right now. This is what's coming up next. And the reason why I like to do this view is because whenever I'm talking about, hey, there's this amazing YouTube channel. You can get this great content to be able to figure out how to learn Keynote. It isn't that cool. But you know what? For here today, we're here to talk about the challenges of remote work. And so whenever I hit that, now it lets me be able to set up that next slide. It's just a simple thing, but it really lets me be able to understand where I'm at and where do I need to be able to go. And then this little bar that's up here at the top, what that does is that just tells me whenever it's green, this is what's on the screen. Whenever I click it, that turns red, which means it's animating to the next one. And whenever it turns green, this is what's actually there. So again, it's just a simple thing so that I know whenever that build behind me is actually done. But again, these are just two little simple views, and you can go through, and again, you can customize them any way you want. You can show the navigator, you can add all kinds of different elements. So again, if you want presenter notes, again, like I said, I don't use them. You can add those in there. If I want a clock to know what actual time it is, I can do that. All sorts of different things. I can come in and customize it. But that's really going to be, again, if you go through and you practice all this, this is going to give you all the tools you need to be able to create really amazing Keynote decks. So hopefully you found that helpful. Like I said, we covered a lot of ground. There's a lot there. So I'd encourage you, go back, pause it, to be able to try it for yourself, build some of the decks, try some of those things out firsthand so that you can really get the hang of it, because that's the best way that you're going to learn. But as always, if you like this content, you want to get more of it, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell so you get new videos whenever those come out. And as always, stay crazy.